Hi, this is Reese Martin of Cloudless Photography. Since it's the end of 2015, I thought I'd do what I did last year, go through the pictures I took this year, and kind of select a few that meant a lot to me or represented milestones in my photography hobby, and share them with you, talk a little bit about them, and let you know why they're so important to me. So as I went through and culled my collection, I realized just how far I've come this year and all the different things I got to experience. And as much as I tried, I couldn't get it down to as many pictures as I had last year. So this may take a little bit more time, but I'm very happy to go through these with you. And let's take a look. So this first picture is of Carpenter's Bluff Bridge, which is down on the border between Oklahoma and Texas. This spans the Red River. And is a single-lane bridge. It was originally built for a railroad crossing to go over the river. It was built extra high due to some flooding in the early 1900s, and had a wagon shelf on the side here, which is the focus of the image. Horses and wagons would cross the wooden part here. Trains would go on the left, and it was toll crossing, so it was a good source of revenue for the locals. Today it's just single lane traffic for cars. The wagon shelf, as you can see, is in really bad shape, but it is a historical landmark. They've got some markers down there, both on the Texas side anyway, and it's just beautiful. It's one of my favorite bridges I've ever photographed, and I've made a point since seeing it in January to revisit. We had some pretty bad flooding this year, which unfortunately destroyed a bridge I included last year near Dustin. But this bridge stayed strong, partially due to the fact that it was built so high off the bank. This next picture is a familiar sight to anybody that kind of goes through downtown Tulsa. This is an old warehouse building on 1st Street, just down the street from McNally's Pub. You can still see some ghost writing on the brick. This was once belonged to the Roy McCarty dealership, although it's been difficult to really track down exactly what this was used for. I've included this image not only because I really love the colors on this building, but also because, unbeknownst to me, I would be able to see the inside of this building by the end of the year as part of a tour with the Tulsa Foundation for Architecture. It's a building that I've been drawn to ever since I really started paying attention to architecture in downtown Tulsa, and it's just a really great showcase piece to say, hey, here I was at the beginning of the year taking a picture of a building I loved. And by the end of the year, I'd been able to tour the inside and talk to people specifically, not only about my love for this building, but for my love of Tulsa and the surrounding area. And so, yeah, I figured I'd include it right up front rather than waiting till later. This next picture I took, this is off of Old Route 66 near Rolla, Missouri. John's Modern Cabins has been closed for, decades now. And it just slowly rots in the wilderness on an abandoned stretch of 66. What's really interesting is this not only sits off an abandoned stretch of 66, but also off an abandoned stretch of I-44 that was rerouted a long time ago. This is one of those locations for Route 66 fans that's kind of a mecca or a holy grail location, because it's not the easiest to find, and unless you really know where you're going, you'll just go right past it and not give it any consideration. Additionally, this is something that's not going to be around for a whole lot longer. Granted, they've been saying that for years, but the cabins are in such sorry condition. Honestly, I'm surprised the sign is still there. But it was really great to be able to finally set foot on the ground here and get some pictures of these old cabins. These were built before motels were a thing. And motor courts were all the rage. People on trips would stop going to these cabins, which were usually unfurnished, and it's essentially like glorified camping. So once motels became a thing, these fell out of favor, and they've essentially been abandoned and untouched since the early 1970s. On that same trip up to Missouri, I stopped at Gary Turner's station just outside of Springfield, Missouri. Gary passed away in January of this year, and although I never got the chance to meet him, I felt very much that I knew the man because of how much he meant to the Route 66 community and how much everybody always talks about Gary. He's the kind of guy that you'd stop at his place to talk to him, for 10 to 15 minutes and ended up leaving 3 hours later. Even though he had just passed, there was already a few memorial indications outside of his station, like the flowers that I have captured here. It's just a really great little place on the route, and although it was built relatively recently in the mid-2000s, it really showcases what appeals to people that are traveling Route 66, which is just that feeling of Americana and time that's just gone, just like Gary is. His wife ended up passing a little while later this year, a couple of months after this. And Gary Station actually has gone through some changes itself, which I have a photo featured later to kind of go through some of that. The day was very gray and kind of sad, like we all were after that news broke. This next picture is part of a day that I'm exceedingly proud of, and although it happened pretty early in the year, I still count as probably my greatest photographic expedition that I was able to take. This is at the Chilocco Indian Agricultural School north of Ponca City in Oklahoma, pretty close to the Kansas border. The agricultural school opened in 1884 as a boarding school for Native Americans. It was open to students until 1980 and has been closed ever since. It's on Indian land, and you can't get in. Normally the gates are locked and security and all that kind of stuff. But through my cousin, I was able to talk to somebody with the Kaw Nation and get access to the grounds, and essentially have rented the place for a couple of hours on a really nice morning. You can see the main hall here has a huge chunk missing of the roof, even though all of the buildings on this campus, which is rather expensive, are made of just really beautiful, sturdy limestone stones. The earthquake activity we've had in Oklahoma over the last couple of years has really taken its toll, and this building has just completely collapsed in the middle, which is just a real shame. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to see the place before that happened, but I was able to go into a couple of the buildings and take a look, and it's just just blows your mind to look at these places and wonder what they were like back in the day when they were still in regular use. But it was just really great, both as a fan of abandoned sites of Oklahoma history, to be able to tour this area. The woman from the Kaw Nation that essentially opened the grounds for me even took me back to an old graveyard back off one of the old country roads that's technically on school grounds, where they had some markers from the 1800s, and it was just a really amazing day. And a place I hope I get to return to again, maybe in the spring, to get some pictures with some life to the trees and the grass and everything to make a contrast for this. This next one that I have here, this is the Union Bus Station in Oklahoma City, which has since been torn down. This is a site that I have photographed before over the last couple of years, but when news broke that several buildings on this block of downtown Oklahoma City were going to be leveled for new buildings and parking structures and things like that, I knew I needed to get down there and pay some very specific attention to this station. I love the sign here. Although the builder has mentioned that they will be reinstalling the sign as an homage to the old station, I knew it wasn't going to be the same, so I made a point to go down to Oklahoma City and spend some time really capturing this area, so that in the future we have plenty of record to show what this did look like at one point. Beautiful sign, beautiful building. I know progress is a thing that has to happen, but it sucks whenever you've got great old buildings like this that are demolished for the sake of that. This one comes with some heartache. This is a picture from downtown Barnsdall, Oklahoma, which is the town that my mom grew up in and that her family's from. I was watching the news one evening here in Tulsa and saw a story about a fire in downtown Barnsdall, which sadly is not really anything new. Fire seems to be the change agent of choice in Barnsdall. There have been several structures there over my lifetime that that have burned down, that I've been aware of. And this instead of just being a footnote, this was something that was very personal. Was the site of my great aunt's salon for decades. Great Aunt Estelle has passed away quite a while back, but anytime I drove through Barnsdall and got out to take pictures, I made sure to get a couple of shots of the outside of the salon, just because it's a place that I had vague memories of as a child, and that my mom had very strong positive memories from as a child. And when I saw the building going up in flames on the evening news, I knew I had to get up there quickly to get some pictures of the building before it was completely torn down. Even though I got up there less than 24 hours later, the building had been completely torn down for safety reasons. I was heartbroken that I wasn't able to get up there in time to get some pictures for her and for me, and that this is all that remained of the site. January was also the time that I was able to attend my very first Instameet, which is a meeting of photographers organized through the Instagram social media platform. Some good friends of mine put it together, and although it was a cold and blustery day in downtown Tulsa, we had quite a turnout. This is my friend Nick, that upon an approaching train coming through town, he decided to get this little shot from the top of a parking garage nearby. I don't do well with heights, even though my 2 feet were planted firmly on the ground. Even just looking at this all these months later, it makes my stomach flip a little bit. But he got some excellent shots from this, and it was a really great day to be able to share my passion of photography in Tulsa with a whole bunch of people, and learn from them. What were the things that appealed to them? How were they using their cameras to capture what they were seeing? And it was a really fantastic experience that set the stage for the rest of the year, as we had a couple more as time went on. This shot of downtown Tulsa turned out to be one of my most, iconic pictures of the year. After some houses were torn down on Utica Avenue here in Tulsa, I went to a little hill on the side of the highway to get some pictures that previously you just didn't have this perspective of downtown without some more rooftops being in the way. It was a beautiful evening, great clouds. I used my tripod, which is something I don't do a whole lot of. And so I got a couple of really good shots, and this is my favorite one from that selection. This ended up being the cover to the calendar that I would put together later in the year, and has been a cover photo for several things that I've done this year. So although at the time I was like, oh, that's a nice picture, great, I didn't realize that it would become one of my big 2015 shots. But I love it. I love Tulsa. I can't get enough pictures of it. And that this was just a really nice confluence of good timing and a good location. This is my friend Richard. This year I started going to a weekly backgammon gaming group with a whole bunch of guys that I respect tremendously. I'm the youngest man in the group, and so that typically means I'm sitting around listening to a lot of amazing stories from guys that just have a wealth of experience across just a very wide spectrum of areas, be it music or culture or history. It's just plain experience, really. Sitting around a table, usually with a couple of drinks, playing the oldest game in the world with one another. Although I haven't been able to go in the last couple of months, it's been a really wonderful experience for me. I took this picture as we were all exploring the countryside around one of the guys' houses that lives out near Claremore, since we rotate where we play every week. So that was also nice for me to be able to take my camera and capture some of these moments with these men that I admire tremendously. And this is really indicative of that. We all have a curious side and just really enjoy each other's company. This is the Gasconade River Bridge up near Lebanon, Missouri. It's hard to believe that this is the year that I really got embroiled in Route 66 culture. It feels like so much longer. Although Route 66 has appealed to me for the last couple of years, and it's been something that I've slowly brought myself into. 2015 was really the year that I dug my heels in, I met people, and it really became a big thing for me. Going through my pictures of 2015, it just boggles my mind how I've met so many people this year. I've seen so many places, and it just increased my knowledge so much. The very first event that I went to around all of these happenings was a rally to save this bridge up near Lebanon, Missouri. It had been closed by the Missouri Department of Transportation due to being unsafe, and there were conversations happening about tearing it down versus saving it. And so a group of Route 66 buddies put together a rally to bring awareness to it. And I drove up, spent the weekend, met a whole bunch of people, and got to participate in 2 events. One being this rally to let people know that we really wanted this bridge to be saved. And then the day after, going down to Gary Turner's to have a full-fledged memorial for him, even though he'd been gone a couple of months, having a date organized for all of these different fans of Route 66 to come down and celebrate his life was a great experience. Everyone was sharing stories and talking about their history with Gary and with the road, and it was just a weekend jam-packed full of learning and activity. This picture I took at sunrise. I was out there all by myself. This was after the main rally had concluded the day before, so instead of there being dozens and dozens of people in classic cars and local news, even a state representative from Missouri there, it was great to return to the bridge that next morning and just sit next to the river with the fog and the early light of day and just settle myself. I really like this shot. The next Instameet that I got to go to was in Guthrie, Oklahoma. It was one of the worldwide organized Instameets where the Instagram community as a whole sets a date and encourages people from all across the world to have their own little meetups with local photographers. Since we had done Tulsa in January, we decided to drive down to Guthrie, which is one of my favorite towns in the world, probably my favorite town in Oklahoma, to meet up with local photographers down there and do a little bit of a tour. Now, I had expected to go through downtown, their major historic districts, and go through those buildings and kind of talk about it and everything. But we went a different direction. In addition to some abandoned sites on the edge of town, the gentleman that was hosting the Instameet took us to a little area. We crossed an old river by way of fallen branches and logs and ended up what locals call the island, which was actually a African American community that was abandoned in the 1970s. It had flooded frequently, and the city finally said, look, nobody can stay here anymore. This area is not very safe. Took the bridges out, and it's just sat there. It's just this wooded area that, unless you really knew anything, you just figure, oh, it's just a little bit of a wilderness right here in the middle of town. It doesn't really look out of place. Once you cross over and walk a little ways, you start to see remains of houses. This is a little bit of a children's bicycle that's rusting just in the woods. There's an old church that's back there where some of the stone walls are still standing. It was a very spooky but invigorating discovery in the middle of this town that I wouldn't have had any exposure to otherwise. It was a really interesting day and something that I hope to get to do again. Now, remember earlier I showed you a picture of my Aunt Estelle's beauty salon that had burned down. Next door to that was the old office of the Barnsdall Times, which was the local newspaper, which my great uncle Marvin worked at for decades. In fact, my mother has regaled me my whole life of tales of being in that workshop with Uncle Marvin as he ran the linotype machine, the smells of the place, and just the feeling of it. Well, I unexpectedly had the opportunity to tour the old Barnsdall Times office, which still had all the old machinery in it. Everything had been severely damaged by water, by the fire. But a couple of the really old printing presses, a friend of mine had purchased and was going to restore to use. And when he learned that it was a location that was very special to my family, he invited me to tag along, which I did, and was able to get a bunch of really great pictures of the inside of the shop, which it was just in such terrible shape. It's a shame, but evidently the previous owner had just closed up the building one day and just never went back in, and so the whole place just sat and slowly rotted, and the water damage was so extensive. I was surprised anything was worth salvaging. And this is a picture of one of the old linotype machines. You can see, it's just beautiful color, but as far as a working machine, it's far past that. After going there and helping catalog the experience, I was able to surprise my mother by taking her to the local shop where they were restoring the printing press that was able to be restored, and share with her that, hey, this really important piece of your childhood isn't gone or ruined. It's actually being restored for a new generation to use, and that was very special to me, and one of my favorite things that I was able to do this year. This old barn sits off of Highway 11 in Osage County. I've driven past this thing more than I can tell you. It's on the highway that we took to grandmother's house every time we went to visit. Anytime I go to Barnsdall or Prescott, it's just right there off the right side of the road. Just drive by it. I'm like, oh, some stonework and a barn and some horses, whatever. After some investigation, I discovered that this barn is actually on the National Historic Registry. It's in the small community of Walco, which actually stands for Wolverine Company. The Wolverine Oil Company used to have a natural gas plant here, and this was their drayage barn. It was placed on the National Register in 1998 due to its contribution to the early days of oil exploration in this part of the state, and has been here since 1923. It's all that's left from Wolverine Oil's plant and operations here, and today it's just used as a standard barn. But I was shocked whenever I found more information about this barn and how historically significant it was to the area. And it just really goes to show you that there are always things that we either take for granted or don't pay much attention to that have had more of a role in lives outside of our own than we may realize. I always liked this barn, and I'd pulled off to take some pictures of it before, but they weren't really anything special. Once I found out a little bit more behind the history, I made a point next time I was in the area to pull over, get some good shots with my camera, something that I could have and hold on to for a while. It was pretty cool, really nice discovery. The Tulsa Driller. I have so many pictures of this guy. He's one of the most iconic sites in Tulsa, and although he sits about a mile off of Route 66, he's also very popular for people traveling the road to stop and look. When you have a gigantic concrete statue like this, it's a heck of a roadside attraction for people to stop and take pictures of. I included this one because, similar to the picture of downtown Tulsa that we looked at earlier, this has become one of my iconic shots of the year. I've included it on postcards and other cloudless lens photography items, and it's been very popular. He's one of those things that there are tons of pictures of. It's hard to get a picture that's unique or that stands out, and I'm very happy that this one has appealed to so many people. He has his hand on this large oil derrick, and although I had taken one of the oil derrick looking straight up, I just love the lines on this and how you get a real sense of how tall the guy is, while still having the black metal kind of going around in that square shape, to kind of give you something different to look at too. Really like this shot, and at the time I thought, oh, that's nice, but I didn't realize how much it would appeal to all kinds of people. This year I got a new camera. I finally upgraded past the Canon G series that I've been using since I bought the G10 in Malaysia back in 2009, and upgraded to a Sony a6000, which is a mirrorless camera. My first little trip around town with it, this is one of the pictures I took of Bill's Jumbo Burger off of Utica, and you can see a bit of a neon sign behind the building here for Thelma's Bar, with some great rust on it. Not only does Bill's Jumbo have amazing hamburgers, but they have a unique little building just sitting off of a highway on-ramp near Utica and Admiral Place. And so it was kind of a stormy day. I was driving around just getting a couple of pictures to test out how the new camera worked. And this was just taken on that first day, and I just really love the color of it. You have the old Coke sign, everything's faded. You have the rusted bar sign. You could barely read hamburgers on the top of the sign on top of the building here. You have the yellow colors and everything else. I really like this. This picture is very Oklahoma to me, and it represents something I'm very passionate about, which is local eats. So that's why I decided to include this one. This is Combs Bridge. This is over the Illinois River, an area people around here like to go rafting and kayaking during the spring and summer months. I had gone out near Tahlequah, which is the nearest town, for a couple of different reasons, and decided, I'm going to go out and get some pictures of the Combs Bridge with my new camera. And this is one of the first pictures I took with it that I looked at and really realized what an improvement it was versus my old Canon. Love my old Canon, but it was clear that technology had advanced quite a ways since I had last bought the camera. You've got a little bit of a reflection on here from a recent rainfall, and this bridge was scheduled to be torn out last year. I haven't been in a couple of months. I don't know if it's still there. I hope it is. I love these old steel bridges, and so there more and more of them are being destroyed and removed every year. And this is an iconic shot. If you're floating the river down there, that's one of the last things you see before you get back to whatever company it is you rented your boat from or whatever. And it was always just a great thing, a great sight for me. Before I even really realized how much I liked these old steel bridges, this one always had an impact on me. Great green color, not only with the trees but with the bridge itself. But you can see it was built for one-way traffic, and there have been reports of pieces of it falling off into the river in the past. There's a wooden sign that you can kind of barely see on the side of the bridge that warns people not to dive off into the river because people have been paralyzed in the past because of it. So, similar to the Union Bus Station, I get progress and that they need to do something else, but I still hate to see this stuff go away. Here's a picture of downtown Tulsa looking down 4th Street, where the Equality Center is located. I took this picture just not but a few days before the Supreme Court handed down their historic ruling this year, ruling that same-sex marriage was legal in all 50 states. And so this picture I took at the time I thought was really interesting, and dropped all the color but what we had in the flags. But became a lot more culturally significant just not long after I took the picture. Again, I love downtown Tulsa. I love the different styles of architecture we have. And you have the Mid-Continent building here in the middle with the green top that's been, color's been dropped out of it. And you have the Phil Tower on the left, which there at the top of that building has a lot of really interesting color to it that you'd know if you lived here. But as it is, with just the flags being colored, not only helps them pop out a little bit more, but gives people a little bit of a different view of downtown than what they're used to if they're from here. I don't see a whole lot of pictures of downtown from this side. Here's a picture I took in Guthrie. They had a music festival called Queen of the Prairie in May, and so Samantha and I made a weekend of it. Went and stayed in the bed and breakfast down there. And this was my favorite act from the weekend. This is J.D. McPherson and his bass player, Jimmy Sutton, playing the closing night of the first night there. J.D. is from Broken Arrow, my hometown. Man, he just plays amazing music, great rockabilly influenced music. And this was also the first opportunity I had to use my camera in a concert night environment, and I was extremely pleased with how well it worked for me. So not only did I have an excellent opportunity to listen to some amazing music over 2 days down in Guthrie, but I got some great opportunity to put my new camera through some more paces that I hadn't had that experience with before. But man, I look at this picture and I just feel the energy of that weekend. And although the crowds weren't as big as I'd hoped they would be, it allowed for a more intimate music experience, which I really enjoyed. This is from that same weekend. This is Samantha, who's now my wife. We got married in October. On the way back to Tulsa, we made a point to go through Stillwater and stop at the original Hideaway Pizza there, which is one of her absolute favorite pizza places on the planet. In Oklahoma for sure. She's from New York, so she has very strong pizza opinions, and that's one of the few times that I hear her New York accent come out, is when I get her talking about pizza. But this picture says so much to me. We're about to enjoy a delicious meal, one of her favorite foods. We just had a great weekend together, and you could just see in her eyes how much she loves me, and that love is returned to her. I'm so incredibly blessed and incredibly lucky, and this is my favorite picture that I've taken of her this year. It's just wonderful. I just stare at it all day. So I'm going to go to the next one without saying anything else, because that'll become a weepy mess. Speaking of weddings, I shot my first wedding this year. This is my friends, Felicia and Nick. I had shot some engagement pictures of theirs, and then their wedding, which was the first. I'd never done an event like this before. They were very happy with the result. I don't know if I'm going to do another wedding or not. It was a stressful experience from a photographer. I've told people before, it felt like I was getting married. I was so hyper-focused on making sure I got pictures. Being a solo shooter, I had nothing to fall back on. It was a new camera. I had all kinds of things that were going through my mind. But it turned out really great. I'm very happy with the pictures that I got. And it went really well. The wedding was beautiful. And so I wanted to share one picture from that experience. From a professional standpoint, that was a heck of a day. This is the Rock Creek Bridge in Sapulpa. Earlier, I had mentioned some flooding that had happened when we looked at the first picture of the Carpenter's Bluff Bridge. And this is some of that flooding that happened this year. I was so afraid that this bridge was going to break free of the old stretch of Route 66 that it's on. Thankfully, the water did not rise above the deck, but as you can see, it got right up to it. We had just some unprecedented flooding this year, and there was a lot of damage, especially in southern parts of Oklahoma. I'm really glad that we didn't suffer anymore, and that a lot of these old bridges, like this one here, survived the onslaught of rain and floodwaters. But this is crazy to look at in hindsight. I go by this bridge pretty regularly, and I know where the water's supposed to be, and it is not supposed to be there. But thankfully, it made it through okay. Now this is interesting. I had seen a picture of this place posted online, and went down the next weekend. This is a National Guard armory in Conoway, Oklahoma. It was built in 1938, and this was for the 45th Infantry Division, which, for its original, decade and a half of existence, it wore the swastika proudly on their shoulders. It ended up being adopted by the Nazi Party, and so the symbol was changed to a Thunderbird, which on this picture, just underneath the swastika on the right, you can see a little wooden Thunderbird that has rotated because one of the screws fell out, or whatever happened there. But the swastika was a Native American symbol before the Nazis took it. And before that, it's a Buddhist symbol. It goes back, centuries. Interestingly, after it was hijacked by the Nazi Party, essentially, it was removed from a lot of things, but you can still see it occasionally on old brick armories and old places for the National Guard out here in Oklahoma, since they had used that symbol for a while. I'm not entirely sure when the changeover happened. I could look it up, but I don't have it in front of me. But this is definitely an example of how how an event on the other side of the world can change things. And it definitely did. I can imagine that this is offensive to some people, but I'm glad that it's still here, if for no other reason than to kind of show the path of history and things that are changed throughout events that have occurred. If nothing else, it's a very interesting showcase of what that time was like here. So this is the end of part one. By the time I got into this, I realized I should probably break this into a couple of chunks. So if you are interested, click on part two below and continue my commentary. Thanks.